Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me. I got something a little special today. We are going to start a series here called Glam Metal 101. And for this first episode up, we're going to talk about what defines the sound. I think a perfect place to start. And right off the bat, I'd like to say hello to my co-host. I got Chris Prophy. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Brendan. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's good to be recording with you again. Those of you that watch the channel know that Chris and I used to record a lot together, but life happens and we haven't had a chance to, but I'm glad to get you back on over here.
Good to be on, man.
And first time on the channel here, I got Rich Catino. Hopefully I said your last name right there.
Yep.
So glad to have you on here. And I know that you said you write for Brave Words, so you do some stuff out there in the world that's music related as well.
Yeah, Brave Words, Metal Asylum, and the Metal Hall of Fame.
Yep. And then you appear on some other channels doing some YouTube stuff as well.
Yeah, I do some stuff with the Metal Voice, and I do some stuff with Pete at Sea of Tranquility too from time to time.
Fantastic. So yeah, so
Yeah.
you guys watching can certainly tune into Chris's channel, but you can also catch up with Rich in a multitude of ways.
Thanks.
So we're going to dive right into this here. And for me, part of the reason I put this together with you two guys on here is that this always seems to be a big debate. You know, what defines glam metal, but what makes a band glam metal and which bands are glam metal. I mean, there's people out there that will even argue whether Cinderella is glam metal or are they just blues rock. And Guns N' Roses is the big one that I always argue is a glam metal band, but you know, lots of people will say that they're not. And in a future episode, I want to actually argue those different bands. So we'll set that up at a different time. But you know, we're going to talk about here what defines the sound and what really distinguishes it from just straight up rock music, you know, like a Tom Petty or a Bruce Springsteen or a something like that. You know, more of the metal sounding artists that are out there, stuff that's AOR or melodic rock like Journey and bands like that. And I also want to preference right off the bat, because this isn't always clear to a lot of people. We're talking about glam metal, not glam rock. That is an entirely different genre from the 70s. So we're talking about glam metal, and then the term hair metal and hair bands. That is something that generated later. That is not what the era was called at its time. It was called glam metal. So that's what we're going to use here going forward on this. And just a brief touch on the history of this before we really kind of dive into it and I open this up is just the way I look at this, at least, and you guys can certainly weigh in on this, but the glam metal sound built on the 70s era bands like Aerosmith, Van Halen, and with it, the roots were really laid around 1981 with bands like Motley Crue, but then developed around 83 with other bands like Rat and Dokken. But for me, at least, the glam metal sound, the glam metal proper, didn't really begin until 1986 and had its peak in 1991. And it would certainly run a few years longer to 92 and then up into, say, about 93, 94, and then just kind of tanked after that point. So in all, though, if we look at it from 1981 up to 1994, glam metal had about a 13-year run. And that's a lot of bands to talk about, ones that influence, ones who are maybe properly part about it or on the cursory.
A lot of bands.
Absolutely right. All those different bands in one way, shape, or form certainly tied into this. So
yeah,
right off the bat, let's talk about what it is that defines the sound. And I mentioned about the 70s arena rock bands like Aerosmith, Van Halen, but also AC/DC, Ted Nugent, stuff like that. So for me, at least, one of the main things that I think defines glam metal bands is the vocals. And so I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Chris, I'll let you start with this, but talk to me about what it is that you feel and think, or reference some bands that you feel really kind of had that defining vocal sound.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm so happy to be talking about this because, you know, we're all pretty much the same age. So this is what we grew up on.
Oh, yeah.
My first concert ever was what I feel is one of the most glammiest of the glam metal bands, and that's Poison.
Yeah.
I still joke. I think I had a crush on Bret Michaels when I was a kid, and I think I probably still do.
Yeah. Funny, we all have the same CD show, right?
But
that's glam metal right there.
It's the pinnacle. Yeah. This is the pinnacle. Like if anyone is asking what is glam metal, just look at that.
Because you know why? Before he goes on, I don't want to interrupt you though,
Yeah,
but it defined the sound as well as the fashion. It was
yeah,
both,
yeah,
right?
right.
It's
And
not
we are
just
going to,
a fashion thing; it's a sound thing too.
well, we're going to touch on that because a lot of people would say that it was the look that
Mm.
defines what something is glam and not. And yes, there is that aspect, but at a certain point beyond that, it's a sound.
Right.
Good.
Well, and you had asked about the vocals. So let me just say that I don't know, would you, and I'll ask this question to you guys,
Okay.
because I'm going to talk about Stephen Piercy's vocals for a second, because
Okay.
I feel like when I hear glam, I don't know, is sleaze metal a part of glam metal?
Yeah.
Because when I hear Stephen Piercy's vocals,
Yeah.
it's just total sleazy 80s, and it
Mhm.
goes right along with the sound. And I pulled out of the cellar to show
Yeah. Yep.
because I did show Poison, and Bret Michaels, he has that 80s sort of sound to it, but I really feel like when I think glam metal, Stephen Piercy really defines that, almost that sleazy glam metal sound for me.
I agree completely with that. And yeah, sleaze metal is it's a subgenre to me. There's the, there's heavy metal, then
Yeah.
underneath that there's glam metal, and then under
Mhm.
that we have some subgenres, and sleaze metal certainly being one of them. But yeah, the dirty, sleazy sounds of
Yeah.
that sort of thing. I think Stephen Piercy, Rat, that whole thing, very, very big part of that. But you're right. Stephen
And be,
Piercy, man.
and before I shut up here, I just also want to mention the vocals of "Pay Me Down" from
I was going to
Faster
say,
Pussycat.
Master Pussycat and L.A. Guns and Twisted Sister and
Yeah,
Quiet Riot, Kevin DuBrow.
Yeah, and I
yeah,
think I think Steve Whitman of Kicks, that's one that I wanted to tie
That
into
too.
this. And
Yes.
they go back to 1981.
Yeah.
So, the vocals that I at least, for me at least, I associate a lot of that with it. And you could say, look at AC/DC, whether we're talking about Bon Scott or Brian Johnson, but two very defining styles of vocals within the music industry. And yes, they go back into the 70s and they're more straight up hard rock than anything else. But it's that sort of thing, that very influential style. And if you look at Van Halen and David Lee Roth in his singing style, more than his vocal, but his singing style
yeah,
is definitely something that I think influenced a lot of these bands. But bands like Journey and where you were going, Chris, with Poison, most of the bands that are what I would call rock, that are outside, that are separate from this, have the clean vocal.
yeah,
Yeah.
So,
Always.
that's where I
Always.
say Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose for sure has
Mhm.
that glam metal style of vocals. And
Totally.
we can certainly talk about appearance and image if you look at the first music video and the teased hair and all of
Mhm.
that sort of stuff, and that they were, started off in 85, 86 in that era and what they looked like. They were full on a glam metal band. They
And they were
shed,
an LA band too. They were a Sunset Strip band.
yes, and they shed a lot of it very quickly, and they elevated above it to just become a hard rock band. But to
Mm.
me, that doesn't change what they started as and the defining elements that, going beyond the vocals, we're going to talk about lyrics and what they're singing about, sex, drugs, rock and roll, that sort of stuff. Guns N' Roses did that. The flashy guitars, it's another point we're going to be touching on in here. And we have that with Slash and certainly with
Mm.
Izzy, but all of those things. But to me, one of the main things is you hear a vocal that's like a Stephen Piercy on something, or Tammy Dow, or Steve Whitman from Kicks. Just so many of them out there. Cinderella
Well,
vocalist,
absolutely.
frontman, Tom Kiefer. It doesn't sound like anything else that's out there. It's instantly recognizable. And that in and of itself, I think, is one of the main defining factors.
It's more edgy and more aggressive. It's not Journey, Styx, Foreigner, Survivor,
Right.
Heart, all the AOR bands as they call them, right? That
Yeah.
yeah,
was more melodic, cleaner vocals, much more keyboards. The guitars weren't that hard.
Yep.
Sometimes like Journey had their moments, a couple other bands like Survivor, but
Mhm.
it wasn't hard like Rat.
Mhm.
That's metal. Rat,
Right.
Dokken,
Yeah.
Crew, Guns N' Roses, Kicks. I mean, I can go on. Poison, especially the first Poison album.
Right.
yeah,
First two Europe albums, metal albums. right?
Yeah.
Great White, first one's a metal album. Everybody has their roots in metal, and it's heavier than what we know as arena rock, right?
Right. Absolutely. Now, do you consider Europe a glam metal band, or do you consider them a metal band? Because that's
That's
one of the
tough.
ones that I would say is
Because sound and fashion,
yeah.
right? The first two are metal albums, actually, kind of almost early power metal albums, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of,
Absolutely.
kind of neoclassicalish, right?
Right.
Then you get into Final Countdown, where you got more keyboards, less guitars.
And
They're
to me,
still there,
bypass the whole glam thing into melodic rock, if you
right?
will.
Well, even better yet, more melodic rock is absolutely out of this world. I mean,
Yeah.
that's almost, with the exception of a couple songs,
Right.
it's almost AOR rock, right?
Well, and here's something, I don't know if we want to talk about it now or future episode, but what kind of to piggyback on what Rich is saying is that some of those bands that might have started out either as power metal or heavy metal, but sort
Yeah.
of moved into the glam metal thing because of the money and the scene.
Yeah.
One thing I'm thinking of is Judas Priest. When they came out with Ram It Down, they
Yeah.
came out with the song Johnny Be Good,
Right.
which is, obviously a cover, but that is totally to tap into that glam metal look and sound.
And Turbo Lover, the whole album
Yeah.
pretty much is
Yeah.
almost all glam metal songs, right? Very
Yeah.
catchy, hooky, all that kind of, the hair thing. Even the fashion with the KK had a perm and they had all the clothes,
Yeah.
so they definitely, but then going back to Europe, when you get to this album, then this is what kind of reflects what they turned into when they reformed in the 2000s,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but that one I would call a glam metal album.
Somewhat. I think it's a little more getting into that bluesy rock thing.
Yeah. But I
More
think
so,
bluesy rock is an element of glam metal and its sound.
like Tesla and Badlands, right? And those
Right.
kind of bands, right?
Yeah. Cinderella, Great White.
Later
All those
Cinderella, yeah.
bands had the more bluesy hard rock sound than the dirty sleazy sounds of LA Guns and Rat and Faster Pussycat and stuff like that. So that's, again, one of the things I want. Yeah, right. Look at that cover there and tell me they are not glam metal.
They are, but sound too. Guitars, they were heavy, but they were metal guitars.
Yeah.
It wasn't until Long Cold Winter and Heartbreak Station where it got really bluesy, right?
True.
Especially with the title track to Long Cold Winter. I mean, how bluesy is that?
Which is the same thing that happened with Poison by this point. They
Exactly. What was the two songs that are on there that are very bluesy?
that are all, they shed the makeup and everything in here, and they're no longer looking, like this. But it's
right.
like they're still a glam metal band.
Even here on look what the open up and say
Yeah.
They Had to Be Good and Good Love were kind of that bluesy rock thing going on as well, right?
Yeah, they were always incorporating their harmonica and stuff into their music, doing those blues riffs and whatnot.
Yeah.
But touching on the bands that were outside of glam metal that made their glam metal album, Aerosmith and Pump, I think is a perfect example, and Alice Cooper and the album Trash, right?
And Constrictor and Raise Your Fist and Yell.
Well, those two, for me at least, I feel are more heavy metal albums.
Okay.
They certainly have their take in it, but with Desmond Child coming in and co-writing all the songs that he did on Trash, and the layered vocals and stuff like that on it, I feel like he really hit sort of the nail on the head as far as that was concerned. But it was just interesting that glam became such a big thing that even the artists who had influenced the glam metal bands were now making their own glam metal albums, even though they're not glam metal bands.
And also, I get where you're going with Aerosmith. I would almost say Permanent Vacation is more glam than Pump, but that's just me.
Yeah. No, and I could totally go with that one as well. I definitely think the shift was on Permanent Vacation.
Yeah.
I just felt the epitome of it became Pump, like they mastered it. I think that is a perfect album.
Yeah.
That's also the era I grew up with them in. So I know everyone is, loving Toys in the Attic and Rocks and stuff like that. But I'll still say Pump is their best album.
And you know who else also joined the hair metal, if we want to call it hair? Are we calling it hair or glam or what?
No, I think we should call it glam metal, but that's just
absolutely
my thing, because I think hair, any of those terms was meant derogatory initially, and then the pop culture jumped on it because it was a way to define it, and it's now, I
Right.
think, meant lovingly.
Right.
But hair metal was a derogatory term, so I
It
try to
was.
stick to what it was called during
Agreed.
the era, which was actually glam metal.
I was going to say, along with you said Aerosmith, and who
Yeah.
else was in that in
Alice
the
Cooper.
80s? Alice Cooper. You had also Scorpions with
Yeah.
Savage Amusement. Priest, like we said, with Turbo,
Right.
and Kiss, Asylum, Crazy Nights,
Yeah.
Animalize.
Right.
You guys are reading my mind with these albums here. They
Well,
were right. It was
Yeah.
all that sound.
and I'm glad you mentioned Kiss, Rich, because I can't think of a better band from the '70s that was able to transfer so well.
And
Paul
adapt. Yes.
Stanley, Paul Stanley was doing glam before glam was a thing. Like Paul
Yeah.
Stanley had the look, he had
Yep.
the vocals, he had the stage presence of
Yes.
a glam frontman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when this came out, I remember the video for Tears Are Falling.
Uh-huh.
Kiss went right into the whole glam thing without a blink of an eye.
Right.
Yeah, it's actually started a little bit with it actually did. It started with Animalize, with all the
Yeah.
animal prints, all
Yeah.
the animal prints that they were wearing and stuff. Totally started there, and even Lick It
Yeah, look
Up
it up.
with Vinnie
Absolutely.
Vincent. Yeah,
I think
totally.
right from the get-go when they took off the makeup,
Yeah,
that just allowed them to become the pretty boys,
Yeah.
um, which was part of what was happening at that time. So it was
right,
a big shift for them, but they picked right up with it. They started wearing the spandex and the outfits. And like you said, Chris, though, they already had the sound. They already had the vocal style. They already had the lyrical content in it. They had the
right.
flashy guitars. In fact, by bringing in Vinnie Vincent and then later Mark St. John and of course Bruce Kulick, they brought in more flashy guitar players than what
Right.
Ace was, which I think also allowed them to make those changes.
Yeah.
And they did it
Definitely.
seamlessly.
Agreed.
Definitely.
Are we still talking about the singer, or are we going on to the
No,
guitar?
I think let's move into the lyrical content of this. We've certainly hit on with it with a number of these bands, but for me at least, it's stuff that it's the sex, drugs, rock and roll. Very little was there ever any political references. They weren't often overly serious, and if they were talking about something serious, it might have been like. Suicide, where Don't Close Your Eyes, the Kick
Right.
song talked about that or
Yeah.
something, or Fly High Michelle by Enough's Enough. But
Mhm.
that was pretty rare. In most cases, they were singing about partying, having sex. Guns N' Roses was all about the drugs.
Yeah.
It was all about fun. It was like a big party. All the lyrics were about having fun.
That's right. And I would think that's another big difference in what is glam metal is fun, party,
Right.
excess, getting away from what's going on in your daily life. And I think that's one of the reasons that those big tours that go out with like Poison, when they would partner up with 3 or 4 other bands, they were doing this in the early 2000s a lot.
Mhm.
And it was like people came back in droves to those concerts. And the reason they're still there is you go out, you forget, and you have a great time. That's what it's about.
So here is talking about lyrics. Here is the ultimate expression of what you just said. This album, every lyric just screams glam metal, and I'm talking about Pretty Boy Floyd.
And they were the
mean,
last wave. They were part of that last wave too.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
frickin' title, "Leather Boys with Electric
And-
Toys." Like you can't get much more glam than that.
I
It's
know.
true.
Look at the cover, look at the way the logo's written, like everything
Yeah.
about it. But my favorite thing about that album is they did the song Toast to the Town, the Motley Crue song that was only at that point ever released as a 45.
Mhm.
So if you'd never gotten a chance to hear that and wanted to hear this quote unreleased Motley Crue song,
Mm.
Yeah.
I had to buy that album at the time just to get it because I was a huge Motley fan.
And I can't remember the name of the vocalist, but his vocals are typical glam as well.
Yeah.
So
Yep. But
Yeah.
going back to the lyrics, though, before you move on, Brandon,
Yeah.
even Poison wrote a heartfelt song like Something to Believe in. So
Yeah.
these bands, even though it's mostly about fun and rock and roll and parties and everything, I don't know if everybody had it on their albums, but at least most of the ballads were very heartfelt,
Yeah.
about love, relationship, things like
Right.
that. But they also had a couple songs on each album that were just not just about having fun and girls and parties and doing that kind of thing. They had a little more to themselves. Like look what Warrant did with Doggy Dog or
Yeah,
Winger with Pull.
right.
Winger and Pull. There's a lot of bands that
But
they
look
did
at the
have they
years
had
those
more
came out.
variety.
But
What's
check,
that?
but look at the years those came out. Dog Eat Dog,
I
1990,
know.
full
Early 90s.
1993.
Yeah.
Jump back into the 86 to 91 era, and you don't really have that.
Right. Everybody was still having fun. Yeah.
And those bands at that point, that's where a lot of those bands were attempting to make the change to modernize.
Mhm.
Dog Eat Dog had the down-tuned guitars on it, were getting heavier. They were much more metal than glam,
Yep.
although So Far
Absolutely.
So Good was on there. That was a really great, song that was a
Mhm.
throwback to the stuff from the earlier albums.
Right.
But, of the stuff, it's like the classic Nothing But a Good Time on
Yeah,
the Poison
that
album.
was the era. Yeah, that was the
Yeah,
decade.
and Up All Night by Slaughter, and
Yeah.
A Little Ain't Enough by David Lee Roth. Again, that idea of excess and can't get enough. Winger, right? The
Right.
songs were just all about excess, having a
Fun.
good time.
Escape from the daily life, right? The daily grind,
Yeah.
and you're just,
And
Yeah.
sex wise, you had Hard as a Rock by Bullet Boys, Naughty Naughty by Danger Danger,
mm,
Cherry Pie by Warrant, right? Who
mm,
Yeah.
would later then on Dog Eat Dog do songs about Andy Warhol and
mm.
real deep hitting stuff on that album. And they had Uncle Tom's Cabin. So you're right,
Yes.
on Cherry Pie, they
Yep.
did have other stuff.
Yeah.
But again, what were the big ones that we heard on the radio? What were the ones that were the
It's
the
the videos.
singles? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
What do you
certainly,
think about? Where do you think how? Because I'm always defending this, and I'm always defending the first four albums. Where does Bon Jovi fit into this? I'm always defending the first four because those are not. They're not AOR rock. They're
no,
heavier than Journey and Styx and all that stuff. And Sambora had the riffs, and man, was he a
right.
shredder.
I think
Yeah,
I think they started to transition into that glam sound with like 7800 Fahrenheit
Yes.
into, of course, Slippery When Wet. I mean, that was
full on.
the
Total glam
ultimate
album.
full
Yeah.
on. Because
Yeah.
I think by New Jersey, and this is kind of go along with what Brendan was saying, that a lot of those bands started to transition into more of a bluesy, hard rock, almost
Mhm.
let's tackle some other subject matter, just more than
Yeah.
just partying. And I think by
Right.
the time New Jersey came out, Bon Jovi was already transitioning. So I think like it started with 7800 Fahrenheit. I think it came to a
Yeah.
head with Slippery When Wet, and
Mm.
then it started to come down with New Jersey.
They're
Yeah.
one of those bands that, in my opinion, did not start as a glam metal band. They were a more in the traditional rock vein, like the Bruce Springsteen
Are
sounding.
hard though. They were
Yeah,
hard though.
they
You
were
listen to the
harder.
songs
They
aside
were
from
on the
Runaway.
first
It's like,
album.
yeah,
I
but
don't.
like Roulette and Breakout and Get Ready,
I don't.
and they're harder songs. They're not no
Yeah,
Bruce Springsteen.
I don't know, man. I hear a lot of the what I call that AOR Bruce Springsteen sound on
Hmm.
the debut, but 7800 degrees Fahrenheit, they almost go the opposite direction. They go more metal
Yeah,
on that,
totally.
and they kind of right the ship, so to speak, when they come back with Slippery When Wet. But yeah, on New Jersey, they had Homebound Train was a
Yes.
really bluesy number that was
Yeah.
on there.
Heavy too. That was a heavy driving song.
Yeah, and Living in Sin, where,
Mhm.
instead of it just being a love song, it's
Right.
really taken this notion of, are they doing the right thing? And the parents don't like it, but they love each
Yeah.
other. What are they going to do? So it's not
Yeah.
just about sex.
No.
It's
Also, um, Blood on Blood, which is about the brotherhood of friends.
right.
And I think the best song on the album, one of my favorites, is "Wild as the Wind."
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
You know,
That's back when Bon Jovi was really good.
this is true. After "Keep the Faith," it just went downhill after that.
I will
And
disagree with all of you on that. I think I like all the different
and
eras of the band. While very
Mhm.
different, I
Yes.
still think that they are a great band today, but they're very different. They do
Yeah.
not sound like a glam metal band at
It's
all.
No. After "Keep the Faith," it was all over. It all went downhill. With each album, it just got worse and worse.
yeah. And it's a shame now because John can't sing anymore too. So
Mhm.
He,
it's a total
no,
bummer all around.
no,
He's better than what he was.
he
If you watch
just
the
can't hit
documentary,
the high notes.
he's
I can't
better.
say that he can't sing. He
Yeah,
still can sing. He just can't hit the high notes.
like he
I don't
used
know.
to.
I've heard some live clips of him, and
Right.
he's definitely struggling, and I feel sorry for him because you sing
Okay.
like that for years and years, and it just
Yeah.
your voice deteriorates.
Yes, and since that time, he's had surgery, and you have to listen to the new album
Yeah.
and his new live vocal performances. He just jumped up on stage with Pitbull and sang. And
Okay, I'll have to check that out because I haven't even heard the new album yet. So
okay,
yeah,
because
But to connect
yeah,
to this topic, it's only the first four albums that they fall into that category, right?
right.
as far as the glam stuff, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Keep the faith. I still throw into that mix because that's
Mhm.
like Cinderella, Heartbreak Station, and
Yeah.
other albums that moved into that more bluesy
Mhm.
rock sound. But yeah, I mean, they definitely moved out of it. And there's a lot of bands that had done that,
Yeah.
tried other things. I mean, the Scorpions go on to do, other stuff. And a lot of those bands through the 90s tried changing sounds and then came back to it. In the end of the day, Def Leppard. I think
Yeah.
Def Leppard is a glam metal band. They may have started as part of the new wave of British heavy metal sound,
Yeah.
but with Pyromania and Hysteria, I feel they fully were part
Mhm.
of the glam metal thing. And because that's the sort of biggest era that we know of the band,
Yeah.
to me, that's where I classify them as. But
Mhm.
the albums that came after that tried all kinds of things from X when they tried to become like a boy band and do all the
Yeah.
harmonizing and everything, which wasn't stuff they didn't have on albums. It was just, we're going
Lost
to,
all the guitars. Just lost
yeah,
all that metal. The metal edge was out the window.
out
Yeah.
the window, and it was
Yeah.
about pop songs,
Yeah.
but they've kind of tried their hands at everything. They've had a
Mhm.
country song, they do pop songs. They've done duets with Taylor Swift back before she really broke big, you
Yeah.
know. So all these
Well,
bands were looking for a new niche,
yeah.
to find their roots before all of them really kind of decided to come back to it. And it's as popular today as it once was. And
Yeah.
thank God, because we get to hear these bands doing that same stuff again.
And the other, I know we touched on this a little bit, but we have to talk about the power ballad because I feel like on every glam metal album at one point you had to have the power ballad on there,
Mhm.
and that was where I think that's where the term really originated with these glam bands. And I'd
Yeah.
held up Theater of Pain before, but
Yeah.
once Home Sweet Home came out, it's
Mhm.
like, oh, so it's okay if we play the piano on our album a
Mhm.
little bit. And then you started to get like Striper, Honestly, and all these power ballads. And then a lot of times it would be like the second or third video you'd see from these bands is
Right.
the power ballad.
Mhm.
Until the early 90s when it became the first video by most of the bands.
Yeah.
Started dropping the power ballad right from the
Yeah.
get-go on it, which
Yeah.
really rubbed me the wrong way.
But
Well,
a
that's
couple
the
of
other
things
thing
though, if
too,
you
is that
remember. Go
I
ahead.
feel like radio. I'm sorry if I cut you guys off, but I feel like even like radio or record companies were like, oh, we can bring a lot of girls into this buying of the records and concerts and things because, I wasn't old enough to go see Judas Priest in the 70s, but I'm assuming it was mostly men in the audience going to Judas Priest in the 70s. But then, of course, when these bands like Poison came around, you look around the audience and there'd be a bunch of girls there too. So I think it kind of opened up the audience too, this glam metal sound.
And it got on the radio too. The ballad was more accessible on the radio
Right.
than a hard rocker. But going to that, even before the bands, a lot of these bands, most of them started getting more of that commercial sound, and they weren't as heavy, and the guitars weren't as heavy. It was the radio hits that got them on there. The couple like Quiet Riot, Come On Feel the Noise,
Yeah.
or Twisted Sister, We're Not Gonna Take It. And that's 83, 84. And then 86, yeah, 86, 87, when Bon Jovi did Living on a Prayer and You Give Love a Bad Name, and
Right.
Def Leppard had Pour Some Sugar on Me,
Mhm.
Animal. All those songs became huge on the radio.
Yeah.
They just opened up the door for everybody really to get on the radio. Whitesnake, Here I Go Again,
Right.
massive.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing with the ballad is those songs would chart. So they had, I don't say notoriety, but now all of a
Mhm.
sudden you're having hits,
Yeah.
and it's, your hits, and then the albums are selling. And so they could be promoted as having a number one hit or a number one
Yeah.
album or a platinum album. And it took the bands to that next level because that was back in a day and age where if an album was promoted and saying that it had gone gold or it had gone platinum, it got radio stations, MTV, whatever, to play more of it because popular album, play this, more people want to see it. And it was just kind of a snowball effect. So it was the ballad that oftentimes broke these bands. Look at Queensryche and Silent Lucidity.
Yes,
Not
that's
that they
right.
didn't have good success with Empire and the second video, Best I Can,
Yeah.
but when Silent Lucidity came out, oh my God, it just exploded everything for them.
And I think even after that, then you heard Jet City Woman on the radio, and that wasn't happening, I think, before that, right?
That's right. Then the
Yeah.
follow-up single, usually after the ballad, was as big or very nearly as big. And if they did it as the rock song, it was often way bigger than the first few rock songs that had been released. But that was simply just because next single in line, oh, you've been so successful with this, hear the new song, bye, and it pushed it out. But it was a cyclical thing,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And you're right though, absolutely, with the whole ballad thing. We can't talk glam metal without the power ballad because it was such a defining thing with them, even though that probably generated with bands like Foreigner and Journey really are the ones that created the power ballad early on, White Snake, stuff like that. But the bands that perfected it, I think, are all the glam metal bands.
Yeah.
And most cases, if you ask people around what song they remember or what song they know, it's oftentimes going to be the power ballad. Poison, everybody can name Every Rose Has Its Thorn, even though there's much, bigger songs.
Skid Row, I Remember You, and 18 in Life, the two ballads, right?
Right.
Aside from your anthem, Youth Gone Wild.
Sometimes She Cries.
And Heaven too.
Heaven, right? Heaven, even bigger than that. And early on with Bon Jovi, it was that way. Off of a Slippery When Wet, what was
Never Say Goodbye.
Yeah, Never Say Die. So,
Yeah, Never Say Goodbye.
Oh, Never Say Goodbye. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, it was songs like those that really broke a lot of these bands big. But of course, towards the end of the 80s and the early 90s, that was really all that those bands were getting played, which is kind of unfortunate. And when your first video and or only song that's on a radio is a ballad, I think it turned off a lot of people, and it added to the eventual downfall.
Yeah.
There was a couple of exceptions though, because you mentioned this band before when we weren't taping. Tora, they started off with a hard rocker, or Dangerous Toys with Tease and Pleasin', right? And Scared.
Absolutely.
So there were some exceptions to the rule. XYZ, what was the song? The single?
Hungry?
No, not the second album, the first one. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, I can hear the riff in my head, but they had a hard rocker. They had Face Down in the Gutter, which was a heavy song. That guitar is like a chainsaw in that song.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's some exceptions. I think like Tough, they started out with a ballad, right?
Right.
And a few other bands, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like bands like Firehouse and stuff like that on their third album when they put that out, and I want to say that was 93, I can't remember, but
that was a ballad.
Right from the get-go put out the ballad.
Yeah. But you had the debut they had, Don't Treat Me Bad, was totally a pop song.
Right.
But then All She Wrote was a good headbanger, so they had a couple, and then they had Love of a Lifetime, which was the huge ballad.
Right, exactly. And then they went back and reshot a music video for Don't Treat Me Bad and re-released it and had a bigger success with it after the ballad.
Yes.
Worked for them. So it all works. And but on this idea of the power ballad, they wouldn't be what they are if there wasn't that flashy part of the guitar that would kick in and elevate that song to the next level, hence the term power ballad. It wasn't just, Mr. Big did the real ballad with just To Be With You, right? And Extreme, right, More Than Words. Those are real ballads.
Yeah.
But the power ballad, it was carrying over the guitar aspect of what everyone loved about glam metal. And saying, we'll give you a ballad, but we're still going to have the cool guitar. We're still going to have the shred element on this, even if it's only at the solo.
Right.
But so many great guitar players really define that era. I think, Rhett Beach from Winger doesn't get enough love. I think he's a phenomenal guitar player. And Bill Laverty from Firehouse, we were talking about them, absolutely
Mhm.
fantastic. But of course, you've got, people like Slash in there and CC DeVille and stuff like that as well. But the guitar sound of these bands, beyond what we've
Yeah.
talked about with the vocal and the lyrical content and stuff like that, and yeah, having a power ballad, I think also helps define you as a glam
Mhm.
metal band, was the guitar
Yeah.
and that harder sound.
Yeah.
No, definitely. And we were talking about Kiss before, and you said that how Kiss started to bring in all these guitarists to sort of because and again, I love Ace, but Ace was more of that 70s guitar sound.
Mhm.
I remember seeing an interview or reading something about when they brought Mark St. John in, and it was almost sort of like, uh, we don't really care what you're playing. We just want to see you doing all the tapping and all that
Right.
stuff. And because that's what Gene and Paul were, of course, about the money. So it's sort of like, let's get somebody in here who could just be a flashy guitar player
Mhm.
and who can, just get those screeching solos because that was part of the sound.
Mhm. And in that particular case, I don't think it actually worked well for them. I don't think Mark St.
Yeah.
John was a good fit for them. And I think when they brought Bruce Kulick in, who was still flashy, but he
Yeah.
did it in smaller amounts the way Ace did it, but it was more like
Yes.
an 80s version of
Right.
it. As
Yes.
opposed to what you point out, the way that, Ace, when he did a lead, it was definitely the smoother, shorter 70s lick, the
Yeah.
repetitive sound that he would do.
Right.
Um, but yeah, oftentimes changing the lead guitar player in some of these bands would have huge effects on what they sounded like and where they would go musically.
Definitely.
Well, going back to your topic, it's what defines glam metal. I think, like we were saying before, this is not Journey, Styx, Foreign, or
Mhm.
Heart, Boston, all those kind of bands. This is a harder sound. It's a harder guitar. It's heavy.
Yeah.
Right.
Not always, maybe it's not always heavy by Iron Maiden or Dio standards, but
Right.
it's definitely not an AOR band either. These
Right.
were metal. These were metal bands, especially when you saw them live. No one was ever light. Everybody, it was metal.
Fist in the air, pumping. I mean, you didn't go
It
to
was metal.
a
Yeah,
concert or a
totally.
Journey concert and have your fist in the air the way you do at ACDC
To-
or something.
Totally different. Yeah, even old Bon Jovi and Poison and Rat and Slaughter and all those bands. None of them are just regular rock. It's metal, right?
Yeah, and I think a great band too that was able to sort of bring both of those elements, the AOR element and the heavier element, I feel was Dokken because when you listen
Yeah.
to Dokken had those heavy, heavy freaking riffs. But then
Yes.
Don Dokken would come out with this like lilting vocal, like very light, almost ballad-esque sort of I'm gonna use the term pretty. It's a terrible word, but a pretty vocal on that. And it was
Yeah.
like so they had the crunchy guitars, but then they also had Don's just smooth vocals, which brought in that AOR sound. So
Like Alone Again.
yeah.
But you
Absolutely.
know what's the album though where they really captured that? Let me see if you guys guess it. Which album was it?
Oh, it's the album that came
It's
out.
Tooth
that
and
balance.
Nail,
It's the balance you're talking about. What is
Under
it?
Lock and Key.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Um, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the ballad though. Oh,
No, I'm
Alone
just
Again.
talking about the album overall, where they balanced out the
Oh,
heavy guitars, but the melodic vocals were so bright
yeah,
and high in the mix, and the harmonies were huge. That album is a nice bridge, like you're saying, between that AOR thing, but still metal, right?
I've
yeah.
got it
Because it's funny.
sitting around me. I can't find it right now. But it's the album after Tooth and Nail.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lock and Key.
Under Lock and Key.
Yep.
Yeah, I pulled out Breaking the Chain the other day. That was the first one, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I listened to it. I'm like, this isn't very metal. Like it
No.
was very light. And I think wasn't that supposed to be a Don Dokken solo record?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It started out as a Don Dokken solo album.
Okay.
Right. Yes, and it was a single though, wasn't it? Just the single?
No, it was a full length album.
Oh, that's the full length, just under a different title.
This is the full length album.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And
Yes.
then, 3 years
Right.
later, they put it
Yes.
out under this,
Yeah.
re-recording a bit of it.
Right.
But yeah, the song itself was very heavy, title track, but the rest of the album, not so much. And
No.
it's one of those albums that I absolutely love the song Breaking the Chains, but just, I don't know, don't have much interest in the rest of the album. But Tooth and Nail totally turned all that around for them.
Yeah.
Well, Paris is Burning is a ripper too. That's a heavy song also.
Yeah, it's a great
And
song.
but they're one of those bands that really kind of defies and goes against a lot of what we've said, which is Don Dawkins' vocals aren't those really defined, unique vocals, although he had a very good vocal, as you kind of described it, the pretty vocal that would have worked much better in AOR and melodic rock. But they did have the crunch of the guitar and the flair of the guitar from George Lynch, and they did have the power ballad.
Yeah.
Somehow it all worked. And they came up around the era with Rat, with Motley Crue, and had the look more than anything that I think they kind of fell in as being glam metal, and then made albums that were more that range, but might not have been considered that had the genre itself not presented itself.
And you had mentioned Motley Crue. Motley Crue is such an interesting band because I feel like those first 4 albums, they changed with every album. Like you had the first one, which was more, you had said glam rock in the beginning. I feel like this is glam rock, but it's also got some punk elements in there as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, Shout at the Devil was just like straight on heavy metal.
Right.
But I had shown this was their hair metal album. Because then I feel by like Girls, 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 it was more of that street, sleazy, almost, they had changed. They were changing with every album. And so a lot of these glam metals bands were doing that as well.
Just the look of those guys wearing polka dots and pink and lipstick and puckering up and all that.
It changed too. Great White, their first album was a metal album. And then they went, with Shot in the Dark, and then Once Bitten, it started to get more bluesy rock, right?
Yeah.
And this is my favorite Motley Crue album.
Yeah, I'm still tied to Dr. Feelgood. I think that will always be my favorite.
Shout at the Devil's my album.
Yeah. That's a great album. I love the first 2, and I always go toward Too Fast for Love.
I think theaters. Go ahead, Brandon.
Oh no, I was gonna start wrapping up, but say what you were gonna say.
Okay, I was gonna say theater. I think is underrated. I think half of it's great, half of it's filler, and I think even Girls is more half filler. And you got 3-4 songs that are really good. The rest of it I can get rid of.
I don't know. I love Theater of Pain. I think that's an extremely underrated album from the band. Despite how glam they appear on it, it's still a very heavy album.
Yeah. Well, you've got Louder Than Hell on there, which is one of the best Crue songs.
Absolutely.
Keep Your Eye on the Money is kind of funky, and City Boy Blues.
Right. So there you go. Another blues song on one of these albums. But they threw on their first ballad on that record, and then you got Rat, who didn't throw a ballad on their album until their 5th album.
Yeah.
Right, which should have been. I was going to show that. That's the album that has the ballad that should have been the hit that never was. Giving Yourself Away. You released that maybe 3 years earlier or something. That should have been huge for them.
Totally. Yeah. That album there, had it come out 2 years before, the entire thing would have been enormous.
Yeah.
That was a phenomenal album.
Yep.
Something we'll have to spend a whole other episode on.
Right.
Not sure what our next topic will be on this series of Glam Metal 101, but out of this episode here, I think we found about 5 more things that we can explore down the road.
I think we answered the question though, right? What defines glam metal? The sound, the vocal, the guitars, right?
Yeah, I think we did. And I think we backed it up with enough examples of what that type of stuff is to give people an idea that when they say, what is glam metal sound? I think it has a more defined approach to what it is and how it differs from some of those other genres that are out there.
But they're all under the same umbrella. That's why Sirius XM Hair Nation, even the Deep Cuts channel, will play, because I wrote down a whole bunch of bands here. They'll play Brat and Dokken and Slaughter. But then you can put on Y&T or a Wasp song or Dirty Looks or Soraya, right? All these bands are all in the family. Just some are a little more metal than others, some a little more melodic than others, some a little more, edgy around the edges, right? But they're all they all fit in the same program,
Absolutely. And I think that's something that I'd like to make a future episode about, which is how diverse and big the overall arching umbrella of glam metal is. Because as you just pointed out there was a number of bands in there that some wouldn't say are and some would say are, and whether they're on the melodic side or they're on the heavy metal side,
Yeah.
it still was all under that banner. So while we've set up and defined what makes a band or their sound that, there's still, I think, a whole episode behind who really is under
Okay.
this banner. Yeah, exactly. So we'll definitely do that. But I think this was a great start here, and I do think we touched
Yeah.
on all the great stuff that we wanted to in order to try to set this up so that going forward, people know at least where we're coming from on what is the sound of glam metal. So, Chris, I wanted to give you an opportunity just to plug your channel and talk about any upcoming stuff that you've got going on.
Yeah, so my channel name is Chris Profi, Musically Obsessed, and I've been doing videos for 5+ years now. And I kind of cover all different musical genres. Some videos, I'm always posting videos about vinyl finds that I find, because I collect vinyl and CDs. And I'm showing off some CD finds in the next week or so. But I've also had an idea to do a topic of disliked albums by popular artists. So I've got some ideas of albums in people's discographies that may be disliked by most fans, but I happen to like. So I wanted to kind of showcase some of those on my channel as well.
Yeah, those are a lot of fun. I have a video on mine called Hated Albums That I Love.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's what's funny. I feel like we all kind of do similar videos with different, ways of spinning it. But what's cool about it is that we all have different personalities. So they end up being different videos.
Completely. In the end of the day, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I know one of the albums you'll probably include is Fly on the Wall by AC/DC.
Yeah, I love Fly on the Wall.
Because I know
that.
We're both.
Could one of the choices be Kiss Unmasked? Because that would be my album.
Yeah. See, and I love that album.
Yeah, I am going to show a Kiss album, but it's not Unmasked. I happen to love Unmasked, and I'm telling you right now, when Shandy comes on, I freaking sing that from the rafters. I love that.
Dude, I did that at a karaoke one time.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was so metal. It was awesome.
Yeah, so anybody watching, I am going to show a Kiss album, but it's not Unmasked. So, I wonder what it is.
I know what it is, but I'm not going to say.
I think I know it's one of two.
We've talked about this before. All right, Rich, what are you up to on either with your writings and or things you might be filming with other people?
Brave Words, I got a couple album reviews coming up there. They just posted the new Flotsam and Jetsam for you thrash fans out there.
Yeah.
I did that one. Let's see. I do the new wave of traditional heavy metal with Pete over at Sea of Tranquility once a month. So that's a great series if you want to know the new generation doing the traditional metal style. Did an article at the Metal Hall of Fame last month with it was great albums I picked from the 2000s, like 2000 to 2009, I think, and now I'm doing 2010 up to 20.
Cool.
So like the decade of great albums you should know if you missed or whatever. And then Metal Asylum, the Facebook page, I'm usually posting either reviews or news or what have you. If I go to a concert, I put pictures over there. So between the three, I'm always, got something going on. So I'll be going to Slaughter at the end of the month. Speaking of glam bands, so I don't know if you guys are going to be there, but I'll be at that. I'm going to take pictures and do a review. So look for that too.
Ah, fantastic. All right.
Well, right after this video, I'm going to subscribe to your channel.
Thanks, man. Same with yours.
Well, there you go. And everyone watching should subscribe to your channels and go check out the stuff that you're doing over here on mine. I actually just filmed a review of the new Striper album, new LA Guns, the Judas Priest remix of Rock-a-Rolla. So
I haven't heard that yet. How was that?
Ah, it's fucking great.
Much better?
It is much better, and there's a lot of differences to it. Some real differences, not just a little tweak here, a little tweak there kind of stuff. So very happy on that. But yeah, I've got some of those things posted up on the channel, might already be out by the time you're seeing this. So, stick around and check those things out over here. But certainly for Chris Profi and Rich Catino, thanks so much for tuning in to this video, our first sort of inaugural episode of Glam Metal 101. And we hope to do more for you guys if you like it. Let us know in the comments what you think, and certainly weigh in on what it is that you think defines the sound of glam metal. All right, everyone. Take care. Have a good one, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.